Hey guys, Carl from Purple Moose Plays. Today I'm taking a look at both the Villagers and Tiny Trees expansions for Tiny Towns from publisher AEG and designers Peter McPherson and Josh Wood. As normal, I will be doing a solo playthrough of this game, but just as I did with the base game, I will be playing with the Town Hall variant, which means that if you've got a copy of the game yourself, I'd love for you to play along with me while I play the game. With all that being said, meet me down at the table for the playthrough, and then I'll meet you back up here to let you know what I think about both of these expansions. Okay, so here we are all set up as we would be for a normal game of the base game of Tiny Towns. I'm not going to explain how this setup or how to play the base game because I've done that already in another video, and if you're interested you can click the link above to go and take a look at that video. But otherwise, I'm just going to be sort of walking through the setup and how to play both of the expansions that we're adding today. I'm going to be playing with both the Tiny Towns Villagers expansion as well as the Tiny Trees expansion. So I will explain how to set up both of those, and then I will walk you through how each of those plays before we get into our playthrough. I will mention, however, in setting up the buildings, the cottage doesn't change. The cottage is used in every game, so we've got this right here. But the other 7 buildings, I did choose randomly, but I chose them randomly only from the cards that came in the expansion. Generally, you would shuffle them in with the base game cards and choose from those sets. But in this case, I wanted to show you as many buildings as I could from the expansion, so I'm only using expansion buildings aside from the cottage. In addition, we are going to be using the Town Hall variant like I did in a previous video, because what that means is for anyone who is watching who would like to, you can join along and play the game with me and see if you can beat my score. Even if you don't have either of the expansions, as long as you watch the video and you understand how the rules work, you should be able to sort of proxy the components with some other components like cubes or tokens that you have in another game, and you should still be able to play along with me. In addition, all the buildings we will be using will be on the screen at all times, and I will explain what each of them does before we get started, so you should be able to play along even if you don't have these cards and components at home. And if you do so, please write down below in the comments and let me know how you did, and we'll see who did better. Alright, so with that being said, let's go ahead and set up the expansions. The first expansion I want to set up is the Villagers expansion, and to start, we're going to take 3 of the Villager meeples. In this case, the shape doesn't matter. There are a variety of different shapes. There are actually 4 of them. There's this sort of squirrel shape, a hedgehog shape, a bird shape, and there's also a mouse. But again, we're only going to use 3 of those, and we're going to place them in any of the 4 corners that we choose on the player board. So I will place one here in this corner, one up here in this corner, and then one down here in this corner. We're also going to take one of these tiles that sort of just explains how the villagers work, and it works as a spot to store the villagers when they're not on your player board. So I will stick that over here somewhere. And then we've got these sort of ability cards from the Villagers expansion. There are some that have a number 1 on the back, and there's another set that has a 2+ on the back. So you're going to separate these into 2 piles, and then you will shuffle these piles and you will draw one of each of these types. And this number is basically just going to dictate how many villagers you need to activate whatever that special ability is on that card. So there's our 1 card. And our 2+ card will be this, and I'll explain what those do in a minute when we get into the gameplay. But that is it to set up villagers. So the next thing we're going to do is set up Tiny Trees. And setting up Tiny Trees is even easier than that. Tiny Trees comes with seed meeples and tree meeples. So all you're going to do at the start of the game is you're going to take one of the seeds. It looks like a small acorn. And you get to place that on any of the empty squares on your player board. I'm going to put it down here to start. And I'll explain in just a minute what that does and why that's there. So now that we're all set up, let's go ahead and talk about how to play these 2 expansions. And I'll start by talking about Tiny Trees because that's the easier one to explain. It's very simple. Here's my seed. And this seed is going to turn into a tree at the end of the game if this space remains empty. But otherwise, for all intents and purposes, this square is exactly the same as any empty square, meaning I can place a resource in that square, and I can build a building in that square. If I build a building in that square, the seed is actually going to go away because, you would be digging it up to build your building there. So the seed goes away, and when the seed goes away, you get to select any of the resources of your choosing, one of them, and place it anywhere you'd like to on an empty square of your player board. However, at the end of the game, if the seed is still there, that space with the seed does not count as an open space for negative scoring at the end of the game. And if it's the only empty space you have on your entire player board, a tree will grow in that spot. And that tree will score you 2 points at the end of the game. So that's basically it for the Tiny Trees expansion. It's just a small mini expansion. So let's move on to the Villagers expansion. In the Villagers expansion, you have these 3 villagers on your board. And anytime you place a resource in the space with the villager, at the end of that round, if there hasn't been a building built in that square where the villager is, the villager will move to an adjacent empty square. Meaning, at the end of any round, a villager can never occupy the same space as a resource cube. If it's unable to move to an adjacent empty square, the villager will return back here to the house. But then at the beginning of the next round, the villager will be returned to the board in any empty space. If, however, you build a building in the space where the villager is, the villager will remain in that space where the building is. And then later in the game, that villager can be used to activate one of these abilities down here. And when the villager is used to activate the ability, it comes back to the house. And then again at the start of the next round, it will return to an empty space on your player board. One more thing, however, if you do build a building using a resource cube that you've placed in the same square as a villager, but you don't build the building in that same space. Say for example, I built a building next to that villager, but I used the resource on the square with the villager. That means that resource has been removed from the board. And because there is no longer a resource there, the villager does not need to move from that location. And then, as I mentioned, any villager that's in the same space as a building is said to be working at that building and can be used to activate one of these abilities. So let me explain how those abilities work. To activate these abilities, you're going to move a number of villagers from spaces with buildings back into this large board. And the number of villagers you're going to need is written here in the top left of the explanation on that card. So here we've got a 1 villager. On this card down here, there's 3 villagers. And these cards again are going to change. As you saw, we shuffled and put out some random ones at the beginning of each game. But for this playthrough, we have these 2 cards. So this one is Forage, and it says, for the cost of 1 villager, we can place a resource of our choice in the town. So we can choose an extra resource to place in the town. And this one here, Renovate, for the cost of 3 villagers, we can replace any building in our town with any other building type. But we cannot either remove or add our monument building. And it's worth noting that we can use both of these on the same turn. However, in this case, because this is 3 villagers, we're not going to be ever having more than 3 villagers, so we wouldn't be able to use these both. But if this had been a level 2, or cost of 2, we could use both cards. But if we use both cards, we have to make sure that we've finished using one ability before we use the second ability, and we can never use both abilities to build a single building. So with all that being said, I hope that makes some sense as to how these 2 expansions work, and if you're still a little bit confused, that's fine. Hopefully it'll start to make sense as you see me play through the game. But before we get started with the playthrough, I do want to go through the 8 buildings, so if you're playing along, you'll have some idea of how they work. The cottage doesn't change. The cottage is the same in every game, and we're simply going to score 3 points for each cottage. The vegetable patch is our food building for this game, and it says it's going to feed up to 6 of our cottages that are not adjacent to other cottage buildings. So as long as we have cottages scattered around the place or around our board that are not touching other cottages, this will feed 6 of them, which is pretty helpful. Here we've got the shrine, and the shrine says we're getting 2 points for each building type we have, that there are 4 or more of that type in our town. So if I could have 4 cottages, for example, and I built a shrine, I would get 2 points for that type of building, so 2 points for cottages. And if I had 4, for example, vegetable patches, I'd get another 2 points for those. The next building we'll be using is the Traveler Center. And the Traveler Center is going to score us 2 points at the end of the game. But also, if this building is constructed with a villager working in it, means there's a villager meeple on the square that this is built in, we will be able to construct any other building for free on an empty square in our town, except for the monument building, which is extremely powerful in filling in holes on our player board. Next, we have the apothecary. The apothecary says we get 1 point for each building of one type in a contiguous group adjacent to this building. But if we have more than one of these buildings, they have to each score on a different kind of building type. Next, the post office. It says when constructed, place 2 different resources on this building. And then when another player, in this case the deck, names either of the resources that are placed on this building, then I can instead place the other resource. Right? So if, for example, I had on here a wood and a glass, if the card said glass, I could place a wood instead. Next, we have the hearth. And the hearth says that when it's constructed, I can place a villager in any building on the town. Which is actually a really good way of moving villagers into buildings after they've been built, which is something you normally are not able to do. And finally, our monument for this game is actually a pretty interesting one. It says, after constructing, I'm going to stack these resources in this order in a tower in that space. And when a card pulls a resource and I don't want that resource, I can instead take whatever is on top of the tower at the time and use that resource instead. So now that we see these buildings, before we jump into the play, I want to take a look and see if I can sort of come up with a bit of a strategy. I'm not very good at planning long-term strategies, although I do like to score a lot of points on cottages because they're always worth quite a bit. So if I can build cottages, 1 vegetable patch will feed 6 cottages as long as they're not touching, so that's great. Traveler centers are going to score me 2 points, which are almost as good as cottages. They don't need to be fed, and they let me build something else for free. So if I had 4 cottages and 4 traveler centers, a shrine would be nice to have. So that's 4 and 4 is 8, 9, 10. We've got 16 spaces. So we could fit 6 more. I would love to have an adventurers guild because it's helpful. I wouldn't mind having a post office because it's helpful. And a hearth is always a good way to fill in empty spaces. But let's go ahead and get into the game. And a lot of our decisions will be based on what comes up in the cards. But I think an adventurers guild and a post office are good to have early because they're going to help us get things that we don't have or don't come out in the cards as we play. So we're going to go ahead and turn over our first resource, and the first resource is a brick. So I'm going to aim for a post office. And I would like to keep this empty if I can, but I'm allowed to use it to place things along the way. So I'm going to start by placing a brick here, which means this villager must move to an adjacent space, and I'll move them there. Next resource we get is a stone. And a stone is not going to help with the post office. The only places that need stones are hearths and shrines. I wouldn't mind having a shrine though. So I'm going to work to put a shrine up in the top because it's sort of out of the way, and I'll put a gray cube there, moving my bird there. Yes. And the next I get to choose a resource of my own choosing. And I need a whole lot of wood for both the post office and the shrine, so I'll take a wood because that way even if it comes up in the next card, it's still helpful. And I'll place that wood here and move the villager here. And our next card is a brick, which is great for the post office. So if I do that though, it's gonna mess with this guy right here because he won't be able to move into that space, and I might have to move him a different way, but we'll figure that out. I like the brick there. Next comes another wood, which is perfect because I need 2 of those up here for this one, so I'm going to put this wood and move the bird over 1 more. And now I get to place one of my choice. So I will place a glass because I need a glass for both the shrine and the post office. So I'd be happy if it comes up anyway. Yes, but I want to put it here. All right, we got another stone, which is not helpful right now. I'm going to put a stone here, potentially working on a hearth, but could be an adventurer's guild if need be. Next comes glass, which is great. It doesn't help with the villager like I wanted it to, but it still helps with that building. And then one of my choice, which is going to be wheat in this location. Yes. So those come off. And I build my post office. I'm going to put it here in the corner. And I can see right now that stone is not going to be helpful because only these 3 buildings need it. And I don't need more than one of these. So one of the resources I'm going to put on here is stone. And I need a lot of wheat. Vegetable patches need wheat. The cottage needs wheat. The traveler center needs wheat. So I'm going to put a wheat. That means anytime stone comes up, I can use wheat instead. And that will be huge moving forward. So I like that. And because I didn't build anything here and there's no resource, the villager stays in that space. And we turn over our next card is wood, which actually works perfectly. I will put this here, which means we are going to be building a shrine. And I might as well build the shrine where the villager is. So now I have a villager working in the shrine, and if I need to, I can use that villager to activate one of these abilities later. So that's very nice to have there. All right, then I need to get some cottages built. I want to build a vegetable patch for sure. I'll put the vegetable patch somewhere in the middle, I think, if I can. The next thing that comes up is wheat, which is great for both of those things. And yeah, put a wheat there. Now I get to choose one of my choosing. I will place I just want to get this stone out of the way. So I'm going to put a wood here in the corner and remove that to build a hearth there in the corner. And it says now that I get to place a villager in any building in my town. So I'm just going to take this villager and put it down here at that hearth so that it can use a power later as needed. And then we turn our next card, stone. I don't want stone. I'm going to use this power to turn that into a wheat. And I will put that wheat here. And the next card is a brick. All right, brick. I want to start building a cottage. And I'm going to aim for up here in this corner. So I will put a brick there. Now, choice, I will use a wood and place it here. And that is the end of the first set of cards. So let me shuffle them all up and prepare for the next set of cards. All right, then we turn over a card and I get another wood, which is great because I can place that here, which gets me a vegetable patch in one of those 4 spaces. And right now I don't particularly care where. I'm going to put it here. Yeah. Okay, and then a wheat, which will work towards my cottage, which is great because I will put that there. And now it's resource of my choice. So I'll place a glass in that corner and I will build my first cottage. I'm going to place it here. Okay, then stone. Stone could be stone or it could be wheat. And I want to work towards getting, I wouldn't mind getting a traveler's center in a spot with a villager. Yeah, okay. I'm going to aim to build this here in the corner. So I will place, because I have stone, I'm going to use that to place a wheat here. And then next, I get a glass. Well, I could use that glass to work towards the traveler's center, but I don't want to do that yet. Ooh, you know what though? I just realized I could be in serious problems if I want to build this. Means this is my only straight of 4 right now. So I need to make sure I'm paying attention to that. So I'm actually going to aim for this, and I will put a glass here. That's better. Then I'm going to choose as my choice. Wheat and stone are great because I can always place them. Wood would be nice to have, or brick. I wouldn't mind having extra brick. I don't really want extra wood. Well, let's see. I will put a brick here. And our next card shows, there's the brick. Great. Okay, so what else can we use brick for? I can use a brick for a post office, but I don't want that. I would love to build another cottage, but where? I'm going to work towards building a cottage here. So I will put a brick right there. Next card turns over is glass, which goes there for my cottage. I get to place one of my choice. So I am going to place a stone here, and then actually I'm going to use one of my villagers to place a resource of my choice again to put a wood there, which means these get cleared and I can build my adventurers guild in one of these spaces. And looking at what I've got, yes, I'm gonna put it here to leave some, no, I can't put it here because I need to finish that. I could put it there. Yeah, I'll put it here. And now the Adventurers Guild says I should build a tower of wheat, brick, glass, stone, and wood, in that order. Yes. And now he needs to go back to an empty space on the board. I'm going to put it there because I'm planning on finishing a house or a cottage at that spot. All right, brick. I don't need brick. I don't really need wood either, but I'm gonna get it off there because it's gonna hurt me if I don't. So I'm gonna aim for building a hearth up here in the corner. Next we got wood, which is exactly what I just chose, which is a little bit unfortunate. But I can use this stone instead. So I will place that here, and I will finish that hearth. Which means I can place him, doesn't really matter, but I'll put it there. And I get a resource of my choice. I still am going to try and build that traveler's center. No. I want to get rid of these, so I'm going to put that there to finish my cottage here. Yeah. All right, then wood. No. I'm going to use this glass, and I'll put it here, pushing him down 1, hoping to build a traveler center. Next is stone, which is nice because I'll use the wheat instead from my post office. And then I get a choice. I'm going to take another wheat and put it here, which means that's a problem though. I get to build the traveler center. I could put it here, which would mean I get to build another building in these spots. But that leaves a hole here. But if I can build another traveler center later, no. There's no other 3 in a row, so that would be a problem. So that was bad planning, but I will place that here instead, just to have it in a spot that doesn't hurt me completely. Yeah? Yeah, because there's no other way for me to build 3 in a row. So that's fine. So then we're going to go ahead and shuffle our cards again for our next set of cards. Okay, and we go with glass. I do want to build more houses. I wouldn't mind having one here, cottage I mean. So I'm going to put this blue one here and move this guy up here. Next I get a brick, which I will place right here. And then the resource of my choice is going to be a wheat, which goes here. Those clear off. I get a new cottage that goes here. And that's great. Oops. Because now I have 3 villagers in spaces and I can replace buildings. But we will hold off on that. I'm going to see in a minute. No, because I need to get villagers off. Yes, I'm going to use all 3 villagers to replace... I'm going to replace this with another traveler center up here in the corner. And then these can go out sort of wherever I'd like them to go. Okay. And we move on. Stone. Stone can be a wheat, and it will be, because I'm going to try and get one more traveler center here in the corner. And there's another wheat, which is great, because now I can do that. Although I did realize I may have made a small mistake, but that's okay. We'll fix it if it needs to be. Then my choice resource, I'm going to take a glass and put it here with this villager. These come off, which builds me a new traveler center here. And because I built it in a space with a villager, I can place any other building for free on an empty space. It means only on these 2 spaces, or this one. But I don't want to build there. So I'm going to place a cottage right there. Yes. That's okay. We're going to work to getting another cottage here. No. Yes. That's a problem. Yeah, I made a mistake. When I placed those villagers back, I should have left an empty space there. But I didn't, so I'll live with it. Hopefully you guys are doing better than I am. Because I could put this here, which gives me this, but that's not going to help. But there's no way for me to get multiple things in there. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, there's nowhere for me to get a building that holds resources or anything along those lines. But anyway, let's go ahead and see. Our next resource is wood, which I'm actually going to use this brick And I will put it here. And then another wood, which really stinks for me. But the nice thing is that this wood can go here. It doesn't cause any damage. That's an empty space, so that's good actually. Now I get one of my choice. And my choice is going to be glass because I can use this instead of whatever comes up next to build if I need to. So let's see what happens. It's a stone. Well, guess what? Stone means it could be wheat anyway. So I will place wheat. You know what? Sorry, he should be gone because when I placed that glass, there was no empty space. So it comes back and now there's still no empty space. So he stays there. And then I place that wheat there, which means those three come off and I can build a cottage right there. Okay, now this guy goes back. I'll put it right there. Now there's only 2 empty spaces here and 1 empty space here. This is not going to help me. But I could figure out something there. If I can build a hearth, that would be wonderful. I get glass, which means I'm basically out of luck. Because I could place this glass or I could place this wheat, but either way it's going to ruin my game. So anyway, I have to place glass. I could use either or both of these to place a resource there, but it has to be done after you place the resource for the round. Which means no good. I'm going to place that glass there. He moves here. So what? I get a resource of my choice, but the truth is it doesn't matter because there's no other building I can build there. So that is the end of my game. But let's continue with the cards for a few more rounds in case you're not done yourself. So next would be a glass. And then stone. And then a resource of your choice. And then I'm going to shuffle one more set and go through one more time just to make sure that you've had a chance to finish your game if you're playing along. And then we'll go into scoring. So next is a brick. And then a wheat. And then your choice. A wood. And a brick. And your choice. Glass. And wheat. And then your choice. Stone. And glass. And your choice. And then finally, stone, glass, and then your choice. So hopefully that was enough for you to finish, and if not, I'm sorry, but I will end there. So then we're going to go into final scoring. So let me clean up a second, get out the score pad, and we'll go through final scoring. Okay, so we go into final scoring. We start with the black buildings, but the post office in this case doesn't score any points. So we don't get any points for the post office. Next is cottages. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. None of them are adjacent to each other. Means all of them are fed from the vegetable patch. So 5 times 3 is 15 points. Next, we take a look at the shrine. The shrine says 2 points for each building you have 4 or more of in your town. And the only one I have 4 or more of is the cottage. So we only get 2 points for that. Next is the traveler center, which gets me 2 points, which is 2, 4, 6 points. I don't have any yellow buildings. The hearth doesn't score any points in this game. My adventurers guild unfortunately doesn't score any points in this game. I think we're off the screen. Negative spaces. I need to remove any resources I have. as well as this villager doesn't count for anything. So I have 3 spaces, but this one with the seed doesn't grow a tree because it's not the only empty space, but it also doesn't count for negative space. So I get 2 of them minus 2. So my score, 15 plus 2 plus 6 is 17, 23 minus 2 is only 21 points. I didn't do great, but it's not a horrible score. Again, if you played along, please list your score down below. I'd love to see whether you were able to do better than I did. All right, so while we're here, I would like to take a look at the components real quick because I usually like to do that at the end of a play. So first things first, the villager meeples. I really like these. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm a huge fan of chunky wooden components. And these animals are very thematic. They're great character, and they're chunky wooden components. I really like them. It's a little bit of a shame that the shape doesn't matter. I mean, I guess you could give each player a different shape, but anyway, it's kind of fun to have different animals in your village without having to worry about what the different animals do. So yeah, I like that. This tile that comes with the villagers expansion, I understand that it's showing you how the villager moves and how they become working at a building, but they're pretty big. They take up a lot of space in the box, and they're not really doing much except a place to put your villager for a second, but really it's not necessary because they immediately go back onto an empty space on the board. So I think these tiles are a little bit unnecessary, but they're nice illustration, and they kind of give you a little bit of a reminder, so I guess they're not horrible to have. The villagers cards that we saw, I love the illustrations on them. The ability descriptions are very easy to understand. Yeah, as far as components go, they're great. I do want to show you the other cards just so you can see what else you get in here. Cut Corner said we can construct a building with 1 fewer resource than needed. That's very helpful to have. It would have helped quite a bit at the end of the game there. Scrap says I do not place a resource named by another player, so you can basically just skip a resource. That also would have helped quite a bit at the end of the game there. In the more expensive cards, for 3 villagers, you can fill your chest with coins. This is only useful if you also have the Fortune expansion, which I do not have. But it's nice to see that one expansion is playing off of another expansion. Cooperate says for 2 villagers, you can construct a building using resources anywhere on your board. So that's pretty cool because then you could have a bunch of individual small holes, and you could use all of those different holes to fill one of those spaces. I like that. And finally, construct a building with any unique resources in the correct shape. This is great because it means it doesn't matter what comes out or what your opponents are calling during the game, because it doesn't matter what the resource is, only the shape. So these powers are all great, and we'll talk more about those when I do my sort of overview or my thoughts about the game itself. Otherwise, there are some buildings. I'm not going to go through all of them because there are many of them. There are 3 unique types of each of the main buildings and 5, I believe, of the monument buildings. So there's a lot there, and I'm not going to go through each individual one of those, but I will say that there's quite a nice variety. And also you will see that the Tiny Trees expansion, which I'll talk about in just a second, also comes with one of these. And this monument is actually pretty cool. It gives you 4 points, but also when you build this building, for every building you've already built at the time, you use 1 less resource. So you could end up building a 4-point building with only 2 resources on your board. And I think that's a pretty cool building. Finally, while we're talking about Tiny Trees, the last of the components are the 2 wooden pieces that come with that game as well. You've got a little acorn-looking seed, and then you've got the tree itself. Again, I'm a big fan of chunky wooden bits, and these are some very nice chunky wooden bits, so I'm happy. The last thing I want to show you is how all of these components fit into the base game and whether or not we can fit them in with the base game in the original insert that comes with the game. So let's get the box out and I'll show you exactly that. Alright, so here you see the insert of the box. This is the insert that comes with the base game, and all of the base game components are in here. If you did see my previous videos, you will know I have the insert from the Ship-Shape Gamer down in here that holds all of the wooden pieces from the base game. So let's go ahead and see how everything fits in from the expansions. To begin with, you'll see all the building cards are in here, and actually I haven't separated anything out. So that means all of the expansion cards are already in there. As well as you can see here, this is the Tiny Trees instructions or rules, and they fit perfectly right here in this slot with plenty of room. I don't have the Fortune expansion yet, but I assume based on what I see here, there's plenty of room for the building cards from the Fortune expansion as well. The ability cards from the Villager expansion fit perfectly right in here with the resource cards. All of the wooden meeple pieces from the Villagers, I could put them in a bag, but the bag just takes up extra space. So they all fit very nicely in this space right here. And again, I don't have the Fortune expansion, but I do know the Fortune expansion comes with coins. I believe they're wooden coins, and I see no reason why they wouldn't fit in there as well. As far as the seeds and the trees go, I could put them in there, but for right now, they fit very nicely right here on top of those cards. The boards and score sheet from the base game obviously fit right in there where they come from, and there's a little bit of space in there. So all we have left are those lodge tiles from the Villager expansion, and there are 6 of them because this game plays up to 6 people. Unfortunately, I can only comfortably fit about 4 of them in here without going over the top edge of this plastic insert. And because this is a perfect square, no matter how I rotate these, the other ones just don't fit in any way, so I do have to put 2 of them here. And they do kind of just fit in there. Now, the other problem is I like to store my games vertically, and with these in here, when it's vertical, if the box is not completely squeezed shut, these do tend to roam around quite a bit. So I do like to place them underneath the score sheet just to keep things in place a little bit better. And finally, the last thing is the rules. The Villagers comes with its own set of rules, same size as the base game rules, and those fit very nicely right on top, just like that. So now that I've had a chance to show you how the insert works, meet me back up top and we'll talk about how I feel about both of these expansions. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the playthrough. I didn't do too wonderfully, but I don't think I did that poorly either this time. But if any of you were playing along, I'd love to know how you guys did as well. So please make sure you leave your scores down below in the comments, and I'll be curious to see if anybody else did better than I did. I'm sure some of you must have. With that being said though, let's get into my thoughts on both of these expansions. I'm going to start with the Tiny Trees expansion because it's a little bit smaller and it's much easier to talk about, and then I'll take a little bit more time to talk about the Villagers expansion. So first, the Tiny Trees expansion. It's a very small expansion. It's only available right now in the AEG store. I think it costs about $10, which really for that price, it's not a bad price, and you are just throwing in a little bit of extra to the game. It adds one more little decision point, but it doesn't really change the game in any major way. Right? All you're doing is you're placing that seed on your player board at the beginning. For all intents and purposes, it counts as just like any other empty square as far as placing resources or building buildings in that square. But at the end of the game, that space doesn't count as negative points towards your score. So basically, it's taking away a little bit of the stress that you would normally have to sort of fill in all your spots so you don't get those negative points. And a little bit less stress is a great thing. But it's also adding a little bit more stress back in, because if you are able to make that your only empty space at the end of the game, you get those 2 bonus points. So it takes away a little stress, it adds a little stress, and it creates another little nice bit of decision making in there. So I like that balance. There's also the extra piece, right? If we build a building in the space that has the seed, it gets rid of the seed, so we don't have to worry about the seed for the rest of the game, but it gives us a free resource. And that also, I think, helps a little bit in planning and preparing for scoring at the end of the game. So it takes away stress because it doesn't count as a negative space at the end. If you decide to build a building there, it's going to give you that extra resource, which is extra helpful as well. And if you're lucky enough to get to the end of the game and that space is still empty, then you get the extra 2 bonus points for the tree. Right? If you finish the game with 1 empty space at the end of the game anyway, it's nice to have the extra 2 points. And otherwise, it's not going to hurt you in any way. It could get you a free resource, or it could just protect you from losing points for one of your empty squares at the end of the game. So realistically, I don't see any reason why having this expansion now that I won't just throw it into every single game that I play, because it doesn't make things any more difficult, and it potentially helps me out in a very easy way or a very nice way as we play the game. So I would definitely recommend this expansion, particularly if you're going to be buying something else from the AEG store anyway, and you've got Tiny Towns, you might as well just throw it into your cart because it's not that expensive and it does add a nice little twist to the game. Now, the Villagers expansion. What do I think about the Villagers expansion? The Villagers expansion is a little bit different. This is a big box expansion. It does cost a little bit more money. And I don't know exactly how I feel about this expansion. First, let me say, I enjoy this expansion. It's a good expansion. Number one, you get a bunch more buildings. And if you enjoy Tiny Towns and if you play Tiny Towns a lot, it's definitely worth it to have more buildings in the box because all it can do is add variability and it doesn't hurt the game in any way. So for that reason alone, if you enjoy this game and you don't mind spending the money on the expansion, I say why not get it just for those buildings. There are some really cool buildings in here. You saw the post office that let me swap one resource for another. You saw that cool tower that I built that let me take resources off the top of the tower instead of the ones that were being called. There's a lot of these really cool, very interesting, unique buildings in this deck. And for that reason alone, again, I would recommend it if you don't mind the extra expense to add this to your box because it's only going to add variability and add replayability to your game. The other thing it adds is the Villagers, and I personally like them a lot because basically all they do is they give you a way to sort of use these resources or these villager meeples as a way to activate abilities that help you in some way during the game. And the cool thing about this is, even if I have them in the game and I decide I don't care at all, I don't want to put the extra thinking effort into using these villagers in a good way, they don't do anything to change the game otherwise. If I just keep placing resources and making them dance around the board, they don't penalize me in any way, they don't give me any negative points. So if I throw them in and I'm playing with 3 other people and one of those people doesn't care at all about the villagers, they can play the game as if they were playing the base game and those villagers aren't going to change anything at all. Now that person might not win because they're not taking advantage of those abilities that allow them to do special things and sort of tweak the rules or bend the rules in certain ways. So they may end up struggling a little bit with the final score, but it's not going to hurt them just for neglecting to use those villagers. And I think that's pretty cool. The abilities that you do get, some of them are huge. The ability to build a building with less resources is great. The ability to just take an extra free resource is great. All of these things that they let you do make things easier in some way. Make things, especially at the end of the game, filling in those last few spaces and figuring out how things fit into your player board. These abilities are going to help dramatically. And I like that. Is it worth the extra money to add on another expansion to this game? I don't know. That's going to depend on you and whether or not you like this game enough to expand it. But if you do, the extra buildings that come in this, the villagers with their abilities that come with this, I think it's really cool. And I like having it in the game. Now, one further thing though is with the solo mode. This is sort of a beat your own high score solo mode. There is a sort of level of scores in the back of the rulebook that you're supposed to compare your score with to see what level you finished at. And that's great. But when we add in an expansion like the Villagers that's giving me new abilities and making it potentially easier for me to complete my village board and to score more points because I'm able to fit more things in there and to activate these things that allow me to maybe swap a building with another building or build a building for less resources and fit in these higher scoring buildings that maybe I normally wouldn't be able to fit into my player board, it means that probably my scores in the solo game are going to be a little bit higher with the expansion than they were with the base game. And there is no new tweak to those scores. And if you really feel the need to have a hard goal that you're working against in a solo game and you want to be able to compare sort of every time you're playing this game, I don't know that this is going to be right for you. I mean, already in the base game with the changing buildings every game, your scores are going to vary depending on which buildings come out or which resources come out. There's already a bunch of randomness that's going to dictate how well or how not well you do in a game at any point. And now adding in the villagers is only going to add more to that because this is only going to give you more variability, right? Now there's more buildings to throw in there. Now there's these abilities that are going to make it easier for you to build things. And with all of this stuff in there, it's probably likely that your scores are going to be a bit higher or at least more swingy depending on which abilities and which buildings you get in any game that you're playing. So again, if you're okay with this sort of beat your own high score or you're okay with just playing the game for the puzzle that it presents, This is still a fun one to play solo, but if you're looking for a challenge or a specific goal to hit or something specific you need to achieve in a solo game, this is not going to make you happy for solo, and this expansion is probably only going to make that feel a little bit more frustrating to you. So with all that being said, I definitely recommend this expansion, or both of these expansions, if you really like the game, if you really want more content. The content presented here is good, and I definitely recommend it. If you are doing this only for solo, I don't know if it's something you're going to want to add. But if you're also going to be playing multiplayer occasionally, and you do just like playing this solo for the puzzle that it presents, then I definitely would recommend this, because that puzzle gets more interesting with variability and with this new content thrown in. So ultimately, the final decision as to whether or not you're going to like it, of course, is up to you and your own preferences, but I personally am very happy to have these both in my collection, and I look forward to trying out the other expansion as well. Thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please remember to like and subscribe below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.